Yes! I am invincible!
What's up you guys, Gong Rong Zong here. So recently I made a video about how an all-out tank build just doesn't seem viable. And that's still true. If you pump everything into armor, despite the over 100% buff to the attributes, it's still just not worth it to use. And I was upset, for two reasons. Well, for one, I don't like producing negative videos. I want to produce happy videos for you guys. And for two, there had to be a way to make this work. There had to be a way for tanks to work, somehow. And then I remembered. Hold on, hold the phone. While I may have 380k armor, I also have 140k health. That's a lot of health. What if I pumped everything into health? How high can it get? And holy crap, it can get high. Very high. Over 260k health. That's insane. And wait a minute. Didn't they just buff clutch? They nerfed the armor aspect from 2% to 1%, but they buffed the health from 15 to 20%. So on the PTS, I can have a health bar that's as high as a maxed out armor bar on live, 260k, and have 20% lifesteal every time I crit? Holy shit, I gotta try this! And I did. I tried it with the default weapon that would help me get more crits, an SMG. I tried it with a few different SMGs, and actually, the Chatterbox did not too shabby. The Chatterbox has been buffed up a bit on the PTS by the way, for those of you that didn't know. It does comparable damage to an SMG of its type like the AUG, so its traits are now an interesting choice to make of whether you want to pick it as a main weapon rather than just a holstered one. And holy shit, this vampire tank build was pretty damn effective at staying in the front lines. I was running all the way up to the faces of the enemy and spraying bullets straight into them. I was able to tank flamethrowers, no issue. I was able to tank hyena gunners up close. I was able to take engineer shotgun blasts at point blank. And the list goes on. As long as I was shooting, I was regenerating an absurd amount of health. There was so much lifesteal. It was a monster, this vampire tank build. And the other key was, of course, Berserk. You've got to have it on your chest piece. So while Berserk did get 100% nerf, resulting in a maximum of 50% more weapon damage at 0 armor, this build enables you to essentially take advantage of that 50% all the time. Let me repeat that. With 260k health, I felt pretty comfortable just sitting at the front lines with no armor and gaining that 50% weapon damage buff all the time. Berserk up 24/7 with way less chance of dying as compared to on live. Compared to the straight up armor build that I tested, this vampire tank build was able to solo level 4 control points. I soloed 3 of them in a row with only 1 death that was due to a bug in the PTS. But it was awesome. A straight up in your face build that actually works in the highest level of difficulty. So at this point, just let me quickly go over the gear for you. Okay, so let's go through the weapon first. What does this build depend on? Well, this vampire tank build depends on you landing as many shots as possible and having a weapon with as high a crit rate as possible. And so the obvious choice would be SMGs. Very high crit rate and very high rate of fire. Then comes the question of which SMG should you use? Initially, you may be like me, you may be thinking, okay, so the Vector seems like the obvious choice because he has the higher rate of fire in the game, 1.3k, especially with a rate of fire talent, Allegro. However, while this made sense theoretically, when I tested it out in the open world, I found it to be a little lackluster because of its very small magazine size. The moment you miss any of your shots, the very high RPM kinda diminishes in effectiveness pretty severely. In fact, I found most of the time that I was reloading way too often and I was running out of bullets way too often to make the Vector effective in PvE. So what was the next best option? Well, actually I tested all of the LMGs that you see here. The UMP, the MPX, the Vector, and the Steel AUG too. And in the end, I actually settled on the Chatterbox. Like I mentioned before, the Chatterbox has been buffed up quite a bit. It does around the same damage range as the Steel AUG, the same weapon type now, so the damage range has actually been okay. And what does the Chatterbox give you? The Chatterbox gives you a pretty respectable rate of fire, 700 RPM, but it also gives you a giant magazine. Now the magazine size is very important for this vampire tank build because you don't want to be running running out of bullets halfway in a fight with another mob when you're trading shots. If you're gonna run out halfway, like how the Vector usually runs out very quickly in his bullets, you're basically not going to be able to steal any life from the mob. So what you want instead of a huge burst of healing that the Vector can give you, what you want is instead what a Chatterbox can give you. A pretty good, nice average rate of healing, but with a very long sustain time. In addition to that, the Chatterbox inherent talents increase its rate of fire, right? You guys already know this. The first talent increases its rate of fire, so over time, you'll be firing faster and faster and gaining back more and more life. Secondly, the box magazine. In addition to its large 60 magazine, you're going to have the box magazine trait, which basically refills and refills and refills the magazine as you kill more and more NPCs. It was just an amazing weapon that I found to be used with this vampire tank build. A very respectable RPM that increases the more you use it, and a very large magazine size that has a propensity to keep refilling itself, which means that you'll constantly be regenerating health. For your second weapon, the options I felt was up to you. I tried using an LMG for a longer range combat, it was pretty okay. You can use an AR if you like, you can even use a rifle if you like. This was really all up to you, whichever weapon you felt would benefit most from the holster talent of the SMG. This second weapon, you will be using it for, secondary purposes, excuse the pun, but you will be using it primarily for longer range combat, so keep them in mind when making your choice. Okay, so what about the gear? For the mask, you want to go with the standard DTE, but you want to reroll as high as possible health that you can onto the mask. Obviously, depending on when you're watching this, if you're on live, you can't do this yet, but be prepared to reroll as high a health roll as you can on your mask, and you want to go with the standard hard hitting. Berserk. Berserk is the talent that I mentioned just now. You definitely need Berserk in order for this build to work because you need to be at least pumping out some form of damage. So Berserk with hard hitting is the two default talents that you want to go for. As high a critical hit chance on your chest and as high a critical hit chance on as many pieces of gear as you can get, perhaps beside the mask, because on the mask you had to either choose DTE or critical hit chance, and for me, I personally feel that DTE was the better choice to go for. And same thing for your chest, you want to put as much health as possible onto your chest. I managed to get up to 40k on the PTS, so it shouldn't be a problem when this goes live for you too. Now remember, for Berserk, you need to get at least 7 reds. And this wasn't an easy feat for me to achieve because I was pumping a lot of health into all the other slots. Let me give you a quick glance for this. The holster had health, 32k, and critical hit chance. This is the ideal combo that you want to go for. The backpack, again, some sort of critical hit chance, weapon damage is fine too, and some sort of health. So I had a lot of blues. On your gloves too. On your gloves, you want to go with as much health as possible, and of course clutch, right? Clutch is the one that you need to go for. So as much health as possible while trying to achieve the 7 reds that you need for the Berserk. It was a little bit difficult, it did require a little bit of min-maxing, but I was eventually able to get it. On your knee pads too, you want to go with health, and I found the best talent to go for was hard hitting. Some notable sets to go for with the Murakami Industries, where you get 8% more health. And ideally, you might want to Araldi's backpack that gives you accuracy, headshot damage, if you can even get the 2-set bonus for headshot damage, and some sort of DTE talent on the backpack. On my own backpack here, you can see it's not optimized. I wasn't able to get the talents that I wanted. I was able to get the weapon affix, the weapon attributes that I wanted, but I wasn't able to get the talents that I wanted. But it's not too bad. Vital plus 20% health. Optimally, I would want this armor regenerating to be damage to elites. So all in all, to summarize, use the Chatterbox as your main up and close personal weapon. Use whatever you want as a secondary weapon, keeping in mind that it's for moderate to long range. On the mask, you want DTE and health. On your chest, you want Berserk, health, and critical hit chance. On your holster, you want critical hit chance and health. On your gloves, you want clutch and as much health as possible. On your knees, you want as much health as possible and hard hitting. And on your backpack, you want as much health as possible with critical hit chance. Basically, critical hit chance and health are the two main stats that you're going for. So on my stat screen, you guys already know 260k health, and this is about the amount of critical hit chance I have on my Chatterbox. 37% critical hit chance and 25% critical hit damage. The critical hit damage is not important because what you want is critical hit chance. So not too bad, 37% critical hit chance considering that I only have 8 reds. You guys can feel free to try out some min-maxing yourself. Perhaps you might want to trade out, for example, the health for even more crit. Or perhaps you want to trade out the health on the gloves for straight up critical hit chance. This is just the build that I am going with. Feel free to mix and match and see how it works out for you. So in a nutshell, here are the pros and cons of the build that you need to be aware of. Its first pro and its main pro is that its core purpose of being up close and personal and its self-sustain work well in both solo or group scenarios, because it is not dependent on you killing enemies like the Unstoppable Force, and is also not dependent on the health and armor of the mobs like the Bloodsucker Talon, especially when these both scale up in multiplayer. It is dependent on your own critical hit chance and your skill in landing shots. As compared to the armor tank build, I can actually see this vampire tank build working pretty well in the hands of a skilled player. While there is no aggro table, mobs have a tendency to target the nearest target, especially when at very close range. This vampire tank build can take the hits while trading hits with the enemy, opening up a lot of space for your team. But what about the downsides? As with every build, there are a few. For one, the gameplay is scary and hectic as hell. I didn't feel like a traditional tank at all, but more like a jackrabbit, constantly swiveling his camera from left to right, looking out for potential flanks that may appear at any moment at such a short range. This vampire tank build is probably more comparable to like an agility tank in other traditional MMORPGs rather than the strength one. Depending on what type of player you are, this could be right up your alley, or you may not like it at all, a love it or hate it kind of thing. But it was honestly very fun, pushing the panic button in my brain every half a minute or so, and I would really encourage you guys to try it out if you haven't yet. It was a stark contrast to my regular sniper playstyle of slow and calculated shots from safety. Secondly, it's also critical that you land shots while playing this build, which isn't that hard because you will be pretty close to the enemy. But not landing shots while taking fire, that usually means a quick death, especially when you're so close to the enemy. It's a build that relies on trading shots with the enemy in order to survive. In the same light, this kind of means that reloading at the wrong time can often mean a quick death too. You also have to know when to retreat and when to hold your ground. Often holding your ground and just firing into the enemy is what will enable you to survive, rather than retreating. But it does mean it's scary as all hell in that moment, and those moments happen a lot. On the plus side though, this theoretically means that in a group context, your allies are shooting at the enemies that are preoccupied with you, so that's a huge plus in a group context. Perhaps the vampire tank build just might make it as a legitimate build for the raid. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my other videos on The Division too. You may just find something in them that'll brighten your day. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in DC.